So far, we've focused on how and why each family is unique and how they function using their own system. We have to set opinions, judgment, and discrimination aside when supporting the children and families in our classrooms. The last part of the family systems theory we will be covering focuses on the family life cycle. All families progress through a life cycle as children are born, grow up, leave home, form their own families, retire, and die. We will discuss the family life cycle and the impact a child with disabilities can have on their natural life cycle. As we discuss the family life cycle, I would like for you to think about and reflect upon these questions. What is meant by family life cycle stages and transitions? How do family responsibilities and priorities change over time? And how can family professional partnerships enable families to experience more successful transitions? Learning about the family life stages helps describe how families change over time. The theory suggests that each family experiences these predictable stages of development, and that each stage represents change the family undergoes. The stages include birth, raising children, retirement, and death. As a family moves from one stage to the next, it enters a phase known as transition. Theorists have also identified 6 typical life stages, which we will discuss further throughout the rest of this chapter. It is important to remember that families also experience unexpected or sudden changes that significantly impact the family system. Those include divorce, death, immigration, unemployment, unplanned birth of a child, and I'm sure you can think of others. These changes alter the structure of the family and, in turn, have an impact on relationships, functions, and interactions. All life cycles changes affect the family system, and with any family transition, changes occur to the family characteristics, interactions, and functions. As you are going to be working with children and families in your future, we will focus our discussion primarily on just one of the 8 family functions: education. This discussion will help you understand how family functions and priorities change as a family moves through the life cycle. The life cycles we are focusing on for this chapter are birth and early childhood, childhood, adolescence, and young adulthood. For parents whose children's disabilities were identified at birth or during early childhood, the emphasis is on understanding the disability and working through their feelings about the diagnosis. Adjusting to a typically developing child is an important task for families, and a child with a disability makes that task more complex. During birth and early childhood, the typical family is usually intensely focused on the child, and less focus is on the two of them. When the child is born, the family has 2 subsystems to nourish: the marital subsystem and the parental subsystem. Each family has hopes and dreams for their children before they're even born. Some parents find out that their child has a disability before or at birth. This is most often associated with severe and multiple disabilities. A primary task for families at this stage is receiving and accepting their child's disability diagnosis. Parents who have advanced identification have time to plan for the child and the disability, as much as one could plan. They can also plan for early and intensive intervention. A family whose child is diagnosed with a disability during the early childhood years may be somewhat blindsided. They may not have seen it coming until they began to recognize delayed development in an area or across multiple areas. Regardless of when the parent finds out, professionals feel that all parents enter a disability grief cycle that resembles the stages a person goes through when dealing with the death of a loved one. Similar stages are experienced when a parent learns of and grows to accept their child's disability. Not all parents go through the same process, and the stages may not be sequential or equal in duration. The stages of the grief cycle include shock and denial, guilt and anger, shame and depression, and acceptance. Also, the manner in which a professional shares news or information about the child's disability can cause hope or despair. Professional affirmation of parents' dreams and hopes can serve as a protective factor in the adjustment process. It's important to remember that the grief stage is a cycle and not a static state. But depending on what is going on in the family and the child's life, parents may move in and out of different stages, especially during times of transition and periods of increased behavior and increased stress related to a breakdown in teaming. When learning that their child may have a disability, one of the first reactions is denial. This cannot be happening to me, to my child, or to our family. Denial rapidly merges with anger, which may be directed toward the medical personnel who are involved in providing the information about the child's problem. Anger also can color communication between husband and wife or with grandparents or significant others in the family. Early on, it seems that the anger is so intense that it touches almost anyone because it is triggered by the feelings of grief and inexplicable loss that one does not know how to explain or deal with. Some are in denial because they are scared. Fear is another immediate response. People often fear the unknown more than they fear the known. Having the complete diagnosis and some knowledge of the child's future prospects can be easier than uncertainty. In either case, however, fear of the future is a common emotion. What is going to happen to this child when he is 5 years old? When he is 12? When he is 21? What's going to happen to this child when I am gone? Then other questions arise. Will he ever learn? Will he ever go to college? Will he or she have the capability of loving and living and laughing and doing all the things that we had planned? Other unknowns also inspire fear. Parents fear that the child's condition will be the very worst it possibly could be. Sadly, depending on the diagnosis and who is given the diagnosis, families are often left without information and without resources as they are shooed out the door after receiving a label. There is also a fear of society's rejection, fears about how brothers and sisters will be impacted, questions as to whether there will be any more brothers and sisters in the future, and concerns about whether the husband or wife will love this child. These fears can almost immobilize some parents. Then there's guilt. Guilt and concern about whether the parents themselves had caused the problem. Did I do something to cause this? Am I being punished for something I've done? Did I take care of myself when I was pregnant? Did my wife take good enough care of herself when she was pregnant? Much self-reproach and remorse can stem from questioning the causes of the disability. Guilt feelings may also be manifested in spiritual and religious interpretations of blame and punishment. When asking, why me, or why my child, many parents are also saying, why has God done this to me? How often have we raised our eyes to heaven and asked, what did I ever do to deserve this? One young mother said, I feel so guilty because all my life I never had a hardship, and now God has decided to give me a hardship. This often ties into that family function of spiritualism. Confusion also marks this traumatic period. As a result of not fully understanding what is happening and what will happen, confusion reveals itself in sleeplessness, inability to make decisions, and mental overload. In the midst of such trauma, information can seem garbled and distorted. You hear new words that you've never heard before, terms that describe something you cannot understand. You want to find out what it's all about, yet it seems that you cannot make sense of all the information you're receiving. Often parents are just not on the same wavelength as the person who's trying to communicate with them about their child's disability. Powerlessness to change what is happening is very difficult to accept. You cannot change the fact that your child has a disability, yet parents want to feel competent and capable of handling their own life situations. It is extremely hard to be forced to rely on the judgments, opinions, and recommendations of others. Compounding the problem is that these others are often strangers with whom no bond of trust has yet been established. Yet another feeling is that of disappointment, that a child is not perfect poses a threat to many parents' egos and challenge to their value system. This jolt to previous expectations can create reluctance to accept one's child as a valuable, developing person. Rejection is another reaction that parents experience. Rejection can be directed toward the child, or toward the medical personnel, or toward other family members. One of the more serious forms of rejection, and not that uncommon, is a death wish for the child, a feeling that many parents report at their deepest points of depression. During this period of time when so many different feelings can flood the mind and heart, there is no way to measure how intensely a parent may experience this constellation of emotions. Remember, not all parents will go through these stages, but it is important for parents to identify with all of the potentially troublesome feelings that can arise so that they will know that they are not alone. There are many sources of help, communication, and reassurance. Now we'll watch a short video that gives a parent's perspective on all this.
I think the thing to realize that it's taken me 5 years to realize is that it's okay to grieve. That I actually was grieving at the same time as I was trying to learn and help my son. And it was a really dark period for me as a mom and a parent. I don't think there's anything worse than, other than if Clark had passed away. But the idea of just trying to pull yourself up, out of this, you had all these hopes and dreams, and then for your child, and then all of a sudden someone said, your child has autism.
Why is it important for you as a future teacher to understand this cycle? Early on, if parents had to fight for a diagnosis, they may not have trust in professionals. We'll review the educational process in an upcoming lecture, but entering the school system as a child leaves early intervention can be a scary process and may trigger part of the grief cycle for a parent. You can provide the family resources within the school, resources for home, and resources that family can access in the community. You can provide that family hope and strength, but you want to do so in a way that is non-threatening and non-intimidating. I also want you to know that receiving the diagnosis is not going to be the only time that the family enters the grief cycle. I know a family who has an 18-year-old who has been struggling behaviorally at school. In a 3-week time period, Austin received 8 out-of-school suspensions for a behavior related to his disability, which is autism. His team didn't seem to be consistently following his Functional Behavior Assessment, or FBA, nor his Behavior Intervention Plan, his BIP. And these are both part of his Individualized Education Plan, IEP. His mother is fearful of the thought of a change of placement to a more restrictive educational setting, and she is definitely experiencing parts of the grief cycle. As an educator, you will need to respond with empathy as families experience and transition through the various stages. If a child receives an early diagnosis, they can participate in early childhood services. Children birth through 3 are served through Part C of IDEA. Services for children 3 and older are provided through Part B of IDEA. Part C requires that early intervention services are provided in the child's natural environment. Part B services for children aged 3 through 5 are focused on the individual with a disability and are typically provided in public education settings like a preschool. Both Part B and C are family-focused supports. Parents report being very satisfied with both services, and they feel as though these early intervention services have a significant impact on their child's development. Self-determination means living one's life consistent with one's values, preferences, strengths, and needs. Self-determination theory is an approach to human motivation. It assumes 3 basic needs of humans as seen in the chart on this slide. They need to be in control of our lives, the need to effectively deal with our environment, and the need to have relationships with others. Your textbook describes 4 essential characteristics of self-determination that include autonomy, self-regulation, psychological empowerment, and self-realization. Self-determination develops across the lifespan. However, it is important to provide an environment that supports it beginning in early childhood activities. There are some activities in the home that can increase self-determination, and these include allowing the child to express their own preferences, make choices, and exercise control over their environment. Can you think about how these opportunities can be arranged in the home environment? Here's a quick video to explain, and then we will wrap up part 2 of the family life cycle in our next lecture.
Hi, I'm Sue Elliott.
And I'm Ed Holland. Welcome to this video edition of Informing Families Building Trust.
Today we're going to talk about something that we really don't talk about often enough. That's the importance of fostering self-determination in younger children.
Cookies are really nice, yes.
Can I have cookies, Mama?
When I started to get involved with other families with children with special needs, I realized we need to start early. The earlier we start, the better. It will be easier for her to learn when she's young than to wait until she's a teenager or a young adult to learn about independence and self-determination and how the world works.
As I think many parents do, you just want to keep them safe and not let anything happen. And I was an overprotective parent to begin with my daughter, and this amplified it. And so by the time he started his preschool Birth to 3 program, I couldn't get the things I wanted in place in the classroom. So I said, well, then I'm going to sit here because I'm afraid. And so there was an evolution that, you know, becoming empowered and educated and knowing what I needed to do to advocate for him, it also helped reduce the fear. But he's entirely capable of learning if we make a little extra effort. And so that's been eye-opening for me, that he just learns differently and I have to try differently.
I think what she's learning right now is to be independent, to do things on her own, and to have responsibility about the things like within the house. For example, like when we are gonna have dinner, she's the one who sets the table. Sometimes she needs cues to go to do it, but she enjoys doing that.
Can you give Mommy a hug? He's here. Giving him a voice was very, very important, and you know, having him be able to communicate his wants and needs. And I don't know that I thought of that as self-advocacy as much as just you've got to be able to communicate your wants and needs, and especially for a child with autism to at 7 find that voice and be able to communicate and try to negotiate. I think is pretty impressive and telling to all the supports he's had around him.
Free choice.
Free toys.
The free choice are go to the playground. The more the things that she likes that she could do, she will be, the happier she will be. So that's the most important part, that she could be an independent person, that she can have her own life and try to make decisions on her own with some support.
There will come a point where, yeah, Zach's going to want to decide what's happening. And as I'm involved with advocacy around high school special education transition, and we're talking about age 14, this age where we want to start talking about employment, and that's 7 years away, and he's definitely got to be part of that conversation because that's his life.
As your child enters high school, as well as after they graduate, it's going to be especially important for them to continue building their self-advocacy skills in a focused and intentional way. In several areas of the state, People First and Self-Advocates of Washington have been doing outreach and education to interest high school students in fostering self-advocacy.
Starting this school year in 2012-2013, we are working with a new curriculum called the SAM Club curriculum, and that stands for Self-Advocacy in Motion. The curriculum was initially developed by DRW and People First, and then SAW has also been able to put its own spin and own originality to pieces too. So it's really neat that these 3 advocacy organizations have kind of develop this curriculum.
We teach team building, communication, self-determination, advocacy, and again, these are high school students that are taking the lead. And what we're finding that success with this too is how it's impacting our older chapters that used to be older, and now we have many, many younger people that are involved in the regular chapters of People First, and they are our future, and we want to support them any way that we can.
I can meet new people and make new friends and just interact with friends from school, and it helps me learn more about what's going on outside the world.
Oh, self-advocacy means to me that it just feels like different people like to stand up for what they believe in and actually to be heard.
And I've been doing a lot of strong work to keep my voice to be heard as well as other people's voices in Washington's. Feeling good.
It's really rewarding to just see how much influence children and young adults can have when they have opportunities and choices for self-determination.
And that's it for this edition of Informing Families, Building Trust.